Rome built its story in marble. Proud faces, strong jaws, pure Latin blood. That's what the statues told us. That's what the history books repeated for centuries. But in 2019, a team of scientists did something nobody had ever done before. They dug up 127 ancient graves from 29 sites in and around Rome. They pulled DNA from bones that had been buried for over 1,000 years, and what they found completely shattered the story Rome told about itself. My name is not important. But this story is, because what those bones revealed changes everything you thought you knew about the greatest empire in human history. Before we go further, drop in the comments right now, where in the world are you watching this from? And have you ever done a DNA ancestry test? What did it show you? Because by the end of this video, you might look at those results very differently. And if you're someone who loves these kinds of hidden histories, the stories that never made it into textbooks, hit subscribe, because this is exactly what we do here. Now, back to those 127 graves. The scientists, led by Dr. Margaret Antonio and Dr. Clemens Weiss from Stanford University, expected to find Roman DNA, Latin DNA, the DNA of the people who, according to every history book, built this empire from the ground up. What they found instead stopped them completely. Yes, the early graves, the oldest ones, yes, those matched, Western European, Italian, Latin. But then something happened, and the bones started telling a completely different story. By the time Rome became the most powerful empire in the world, the DNA had changed, dramatically, almost beyond recognition. So, who were these people? And how did Rome's own blood get replaced, without a single war, without a single invasion? Segment 2. The Eastern Flood Rome Invited In. Here's what nobody tells you in school. Rome didn't get replaced by an outside army. Rome opened its own gates. Deliberately, repeatedly, over hundreds of years. Dr. Margaret Antonio confirmed it directly in her 2019 study published in the journal Science. By 200 AD, the majority of people living inside the city of Rome carried genetic ancestry from the Eastern Mediterranean. We're talking about modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt. And think about that for a second. The capital of the Western world, genetically, was Middle Eastern. Now, this wasn't an accident. Rome's economy ran on movement. Millions of slaves, soldiers, traders, and craftsmen were pulled from every corner of the empire and brought to Rome. The city needed them. It couldn't function without them. Dr. Clemens Weiss from Stanford put it plainly. And he said, and I'm quoting directly here, the expansion of the empire was a huge undertaking requiring thousands of troops with trade, labor, slavery, and forced displacement. As the empire expanded, it pulled in more and more people. And the DNA proves it. Researchers sequenced 204 new genomes from 53 archaeological sites across 18 different countries. The pattern was the same everywhere. People were being buried far from where their ancestry pointed to. Movement was happening at a scale nobody had imagined. One grave in particular stopped scientists cold. A Roman soldier, buried in the heart of Italy, Roman armor, Roman weapons, Latin inscription on the stone above him. His DNA? Anatolian, from modern-day Turkey, over 2,000 miles away. He wore Rome's face. He fought Rome's wars. He died on Roman soil. But his blood remembered somewhere completely different. Thus now, if ordinary soldiers carried Eastern blood, what about the men at the very top? The senators, the generals, the emperors themselves? That answer is going to surprise you even more. Segment 3. The Emperor's Secret Bloodline. Go higher than the soldiers. Go to the palaces, the Senate floors, the marble thrones, and the genetic story gets even more explosive. Researchers analyzed high-status Roman burials, the graves of the elite, from 100 to 300 AD. And in some of those imperial-era cemeteries, Near Eastern and North African ancestry showed up in more than 60% of the individuals tested. More than 60%. The men who were writing Roman law, commanding Roman armies, building the Colosseum, were not, by blood, the descendants of the original Latin founders of Rome. Dr. Alfredo Coppa, a physical anthropologist from Sapienza University of Rome, one of Italy's most respected ancient DNA researchers, spent years collecting samples from Roman burial sites across Italy. He noted that the genetic diversity found in elite Roman graves was, in his words, far greater than expected. And then there's Emperor Elagabalus, Syrian by birth, Roman by title. He became emperor at just 14 years old. He brought Eastern sun worship rituals into the heart of Rome. He worshipped a deity from his home city of Emesa in Syria. He wore Eastern robes in public. He was Rome's emperor, and he had never been Roman by blood. But here's the twist that nobody talks about. Roman identity, by this point in history, had become something you wore, not something you were born with. Being Roman meant loyalty to the system. It meant speaking Latin. It meant obeying Roman law. Your blood didn't matter. Your passport did. And that system, that Roman passport, was about to face the thing it could not defeat. Not an army, not a rebellion, something that came from the north. And it wore Roman armor. Segment 4. The defenders who were never Roman. By the 300s AD, something had quietly broken inside Rome's military. The legions, once filled with Italian-born soldiers, were now dominated by men called the foederati. These were Germanic warriors, Gothic fighters, Hunnic horsemen. Was hired by Rome to defend an empire whose original soldiers had simply run out. Ancient DNA from late Roman military cemeteries confirms this completely. The graves show North African archers buried next to steppe horsemen, Germanic swordsmen buried in Roman armor, men from across the known world, all fighting under the Roman eagle, none of them Roman by blood. Dr. Krishna R. Virama of Stony Brook University in New York co-led a 2024 study of post-Roman genetic communities in Italy. His team found that these barbarian soldiers didn't just defend Rome. Their DNA stayed in Italy after Rome fell. They became the ancestors of modern Italians. They came to protect an empire, and they ended up becoming the people who replaced it. But there was one man who held all of this together. One man who was the last bridge between Rome and its foreign defenders. His name was Stilicho, half Vandal, half Roman, the most powerful general in the Western Empire. By 408 AD, Stilicho was the only man capable of stopping what was coming. The Roman Senate knew it. The emperor knew it. And then the Roman Senate had him executed, not a barbarian, not an enemy. Rome itself killed its last protector. 3 years later, in 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked Rome for the first time in 800 years. But here's what historians almost never mention. Even before Stilicho fell, even before the gates opened, something invisible had already been killing Rome for 2 centuries. This something that moved not through battlefields, but through blood, and scientists only discovered its full genetic impact in the last decade. Segment 5, The Invisible Army, 165 AD. A Roman army returns from the east. They brought back gold, weapons, slaves. They also brought back something they couldn't see. Within months, people across the empire started dying. Fever, skin sores, internal bleeding. It spread through cities, through army camps, through trade routes. Historians called it the Antonine Plague. Modern scientists believe it was smallpox. It killed an estimated 5 to 10 million people. Then, 80 years later, it happened again. Worse this time, the plague of Cyprian. Somewhere between 249 and 262 AD, this second wave killed up to 25 million people. At its peak, 5,000 people were dying every single day in the city of Rome alone. But here's what the DNA reveals. And this is the part that nobody talks about. Researchers analyzing plague victim cemeteries from this era found something stunning. Entire genetic lineages, families, bloodlines, communities, simply vanish from the DNA record. Within 2 generations, gone. Marcel Keller and Maria Spiro, researchers at the Max Planck Institute, reconstructed ancient Y. pestis plague genomes from burial sites across France, Germany, Spain, and Britain. Their findings, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, showed the plague reached further than anyone had assumed and evolved as it spread, becoming more deadly over time. The population vacuum it left behind was enormous, and that vacuum got filled immediately by the same eastern and steppe migrants who were already moving into Roman territory. The plague didn't just kill people, it deleted Rome's biological memory, and then new people from completely different parts of the world moved in and wrote over it. So one burial from Roman-era Lyon in modern France shows this heartbreakingly clearly. A mother and her young child buried together. The child's DNA, first-generation Eastern Mediterranean. The mother, local Gallic. Two completely different worlds, meeting in one grave, in a city dying of plague. But just as the plague was finishing its work, a new genetic signal appeared in Roman bones, one that had not come from the East, one that had not come from Africa. Why, this one came from the frozen North, and it had already destroyed one civilization before. Segment 6, the ghost from the steppe. This is the part of the story that genuinely shocked the scientists. After 300 AD, researchers began finding a new genetic signal in Roman-Italian skeletons. A signal that did not belong to Eastern Mediterranean populations, did not belong to Germanic tribes, did not belong to any group that Roman history had ever clearly identified as a major presence in the empire. It came from the Pontic Caspian steppe. That's a massive grassland stretching across modern Ukraine and southern Russia. And here's where it gets truly extraordinary. This exact same genetic signal, this steppe ancestry component, had already reshaped Bronze Age Europe 3,000 years earlier. Around 3000 BC, Mono steppe herders poured into Western Europe and genetically replaced the Neolithic farming populations that had lived there for millennia. The same wave, thousands of years apart, happening again. Dr. Jonathan Pritchard, professor of genetics and biology at Stanford University and one of the lead researchers on the 2024 eLife study, stated clearly, now, we can add new details from a genetic perspective. And what those details showed was a pattern of civilizational genetic reset that repeats across millennia. This steppe signal was linked to Gothic, Hunnic, and Allan populations. These were not purely conquering armies. Many of them entered Roman territory as refugees, fleeing the Huns who were pushing from Central Asia westward. Rome, out of desperation, let them settle inside its borders. They came as refugees, and they rewrote the genome of an empire. And the pattern was clear to every scientist who looked at the data. Every single time this steppe signal surged through a population in human history, the civilization around it restructured completely. Rome was no different. The restructuring was coming. And when it arrived, it didn't just break the empire into pieces, it broke the DNA into pieces too. Segment 7, One Empire, 50 DNAs, 476 AD. When the last Roman emperor in the West is removed from power by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. No dramatic battle, no burning of Rome, just a quiet end. But genetically, what happened next was anything but quiet. The moment the Western Empire fragmented, the genetic transformation it had been building for 500 years froze in place, differently in every region. In Spain, the Visigoths left a distinct genetic fingerprint. In France, it was the Franks. In northern Italy, the Lombards arrived and reshaped the local genome entirely. In the Balkans, a 2023 study published in Cell, led by researcher Inigo Olalde, analyzed 136 individuals from Roman frontier sites. Despite centuries of Roman military occupation and cultural control, the DNA showed zero genetic contribution from Italian-descended people. None at all. But nothing in all of Roman genetic history is more strange, more puzzling, than what happened in Britain. Rome occupied Britain for 400 years. They built Hadrian's Wall. They founded London. They stationed tens of thousands of soldiers there. Roman roads, Roman baths, Roman temples, everywhere. And yet, modern British DNA shows almost no Roman genetic contribution whatsoever. Dr. Margaret Antonio's 2024 Stanford study confirmed it. People in Britain showed ancestry patterns pointing North and Central European, not Mediterranean, not Roman, 4 centuries of the most powerful army in history. And genetically, it's as if they were never there. How does an empire leave no biological trace? The soldiers came, they served, they left, they did not stay, they did not mix. And when Rome pulled its troops out of Britain in 410 AD, it took its DNA with it. But while Britain erased Rome's genetic legacy completely, there is one place in the Mediterranean where the opposite happened, where time stopped. So where the original pre-Roman DNA survived, perfectly preserved, right in the middle of an ocean Rome controlled entirely, Segment 8. The frozen island Sardinia. A small island in the middle of the Mediterranean. Rome controlled it for centuries. Roman roads ran through it. Roman governors administered it. Roman taxes were collected there. And yet, Sardinians today carry DNA that is genetically closer to 7,000-year-old Anatolian farmers than to any modern Italian, any Roman-era individual, or any medieval European. 7,000 years. The entire Roman Empire rose and fell around Sardinia, and its DNA barely moved. Researchers from the University of Vienna in the landmark 2019 science study confirmed that Sardinian genetic isolation represents one of the most remarkable cases of population preservation in all of European genetic history. What this means is staggering. Sardinians are living time capsules. When their DNA is a snapshot of what the original pre-Roman Europeans actually looked like, before the steppe wave, before the Eastern Flood, before the plagues, before the empire. There is a shepherd in Sardinia today, an ordinary man living an ordinary life, whose genome connects him more directly to a farmer who lived 7,000 years ago than to a Roman soldier who marched past his island 2,000 years ago. Rome could not touch them. But while the mainland was being genetically rewritten page by page, Sardinia kept its original text, unchanged. And that contrast between frozen Sardinia and the constantly shifting mainland reveals the full scale of what Rome actually did to the genetics of the ancient world. But the mainland didn't just change. What it became, the mosaic it turned into after Rome fell, is still visible today, in the DNA of people who think they know exactly where they come from. Saying Segment 9, modern Italians don't know the truth. Ask any Italian where their people come from. They'll tell you Rome, the Caesars, the Colosseum, the legions. The DNA tells a more complicated story. Modern Italians are not one people. Genetically, they never were. Southern Italians carry DNA that is significantly closer to modern Greeks and Lebanese than to northern Italians. The Eastern Mediterranean flood that defined imperial Rome left its deepest mark in the south. And northern Italians, on the other hand, carry far more steppe and Germanic ancestry, the direct genetic result of Gothic and Lombard migrations that flooded the Po Valley after Rome's collapse. Dr. Clemens Weiss of Stanford noted in the 2024 eLife study that at least 8% of individuals across the entire empire were buried far from where their ancestry pointed. That number, just 8%, sounds small. But across a population of tens of millions, spread over centuries, it represents an almost incomprehensible amount of human movement. Trade, military deployment, slavery, families torn apart and scattered across continents. Dr. Krishna R. Virama of Stony Brook University, whose 2024 study examined post-Roman elite communities, found that these communities were, in his own words, genetically surprisingly diverse, even after Rome's fall. The mixing didn't stop when the empire ended. It just changed shape. And then there is the part that no Italian nationalism can account for. The people most loudly claiming Roman heritage are often the ones whose DNA connects them most directly to the peoples Rome conquered, not Rome's founders. You don't inherit an empire through blood. You inherit it through the story you tell about yourself. And Rome told the greatest story the ancient world ever heard. But buried beneath that story, deeper than any marble monument, there is one final secret. There's one genetic puzzle that modern science has not yet solved. One signal that appeared in 4 different countries, in 4 completely unrelated populations, and left scientists with no explanation. Segment 10, the code that never died. Pull back from Italy. Pull back from Britain. Pull back from Sardinia and the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean. Look at the whole picture. What Roman-era migrations actually created, and this is confirmed across the 2019 science study. The 2024 eLife study and the Harvard ancient DNA research on the Danube frontier was something no other civilization in history had done at this scale. Rome built genetic bridges between populations that had never previously met. Lebanese ancestry in Italian graves, North African DNA in British soil, Anatolian genes in German cemeteries, steppe blood in Roman palaces. Rome didn't just conquer the Mediterranean. Rome became the Mediterranean. It absorbed every people it touched and left pieces of them permanently in the genome of the modern world. Dr. Jonathan Pritchard of Stanford said it best. Now, we can add new details from a genetic perspective, and those details keep coming. The Roman DNA Project, an ongoing international research initiative, continues to sequence newly excavated Roman-era remains every year. Each new burial adds another layer to a story that is still being written. And here is what we know about the fall. Rome was not killed by one thing. It was transformed by everything. The Eastern Flood changed its blood. The plague erased its original population. The steppe wave restructured its military and its borders, and the empire's own political decisions, executing Stilicho, trusting foreign soldiers, splitting into East and West, removed every remaining safeguard. What came after Rome was not a collapse, it was a transformation. Medieval Europe, the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic Golden Age, the modern Mediterranean world, all of them carry Roman-era genetic signatures inside them. The empire didn't die. It dissolved into everything that came after it. But here is the question that no scientist has answered yet. In modern Lebanese populations, in Sicilians, in Romanians, researchers have found the same genetic cluster, a shared ancestral signal from the Roman era, appearing simultaneously in all three populations. But populations that have had little to no contact with each other for over 1,000 years. They carry the same ancient DNA. Nobody knows who it belonged to. Nobody knows how it spread across 3 countries and 3 cultures. There is no skeleton, no name, no historical record, just the signal. Quiet, patient, waiting inside millions of living people. Rome left us its roads, its laws, its language. But in its DNA, it left us a mystery that 2,000 years still haven't solved. And that mystery? That's the next thread.